Hello everyone, welcome to Tuesday's video on Celtic A.M. We're talking about Celtic again today. It's kind of what we do on the channel because we've now reached the final 10 days of the transfer window. So I wanted to do a video today solely focusing on transfer business. Players coming in, players, one in particular, one big one in particular, potentially leaving. Because as I say, we've not got much time to go really before the window slams shut. It's a week on Friday at 11:30 p.m. So really not long. Let's find out exactly what's going on at Celtic, or at least do our best to interpret what's been said. Because there may be a sense of inevitability about what's going to happen with Matt O'Riley. Some may argue that's been the case all summer. It was only last week that I was telling John that I've not really come round to the realisation that Matt O'Riley may be leaving Celtic this summer. John was saying he probably felt that was going to be the case. And maybe it's my time to come over to John's way of thinking, because there's been a bit of an update on Matt O'Riley's future, and it came late last night from the Daily Mail's Stephen McGowan and Callum Crowe as well. And it's titled, as you can see, "Brighton ready to break Scottish transfer record to land O'Riley." Now, the report says that Brighton are prepared to pay in excess of £25 million to sign O'Riley. They are said to be confident of securing a deal. Now, I know for a lot of people the temptation when they hear stuff from newspapers is immediately just to think this is just drummed up garbage. And listen, I'm not the newspaper's biggest fan. A lot of it is. I think equally you need to look at certain publications and certain journalists and reporters who have a pretty good track record with various stories, and certainly when Stephen McGowan's name is attached onto a Celtic report, I think it's worth paying attention to it. And another point is that it's not just the Daily Mail that are reporting this latest development, that Brighton seem pretty confident of signing O'Riley. Virtually every outlet in Scotland is reporting this. So I think there's certainly something pretty credible to this, if I'm honest. Now, Atalanta, who I think have had 107 bids for O'Riley rejected so far this summer, they're said to be out of the running now. They signed a guy called Lazar Samardzic from Udinese over the course of the weekend. He's a midfielder, so it's felt that they've gone for him rather than O'Riley. They kind of wasted everyone's time, I guess. Southampton, I think, are out of the running for O'Riley. I'm pretty sure their manager, Russell Martin, who would love to sign O'Riley, has kind of admitted that he's probably a little bit too expensive even for all their Premier League money. But it seems like Brighton are now the team most likely to sign O'Riley. They have just forked out a £40 million fee to sign Jorginho Rutter from Leeds. That's a club record, and they could be about to spend more. Now, just going back to the Mail report, it says that Brighton are ready to top the £25 million that Arsenal paid us for Kieran Tierney 5 years ago. Just quoting here, sources have indicated that O'Riley's £25 million price tag won't be an issue, and are confident that both clubs can now thrash out a deal. So again, I think the language is quite important here. There's no real indication that there'll be any issue in this deal. It seems like Brighton have the money, they want to sign O'Riley, and as we've known all along, if the right money comes in for O'Riley, Celtic will accept that. Brendan Rodgers has said that on many occasions. The issue is that that asking price hasn't been met yet, but it seems like it is probably going to be in the coming days from Brighton, and O'Riley will probably be heading off at that stage, which again, depending what stage you're at of dealing with that, that would kind of determine exactly how you feel about it. It'd certainly be a blow to lose Matt O'Riley, but That is the Celtic transfer model. Sign players, get a couple of years out of them, 2.5 in O'Reilly's case, turn them into, well, superstars in terms of Scottish football, and then move them on for considerably more than we signed them for. So you can't really argue with it. It does seem like that's going to be the case. So obviously we'll stay on top of that. Hopefully it's not, but we'll stay on top of it as we go forward. What I do want to chat about now is in terms of bringing players in and what the Celtic plan is likely to be if and potentially when Matt O'Reilly moves on. And Brendan Rodgers has actually recently said that he'd like to sign 2 midfielders if Matt O'Reilly leaves. Now, speaking just at the weekend, he said, "I still think we need another player in that position. If he was to go, we'd need 2 more. I will need to speak to the board. There's a lot of work going on and there's lots that we need to do. We know where we want to strengthen and I'm pretty hopeful that we can do that." So there we have it in black and white. Brendan Rodgers wants to sign 2 midfielders if Matt O'Reilly moves on. But that's not all we need in the next 10 days. I think we all feel that Celtic need to sign a first choice left back. As far as I'm concerned, that's a non-negotiable. We cannot go into the season with just Greg Taylor as a kind of first choice left back. That cannot be allowed to happen under any circumstances. I also, like many, feel that we need a centre back as well. And I will return to that topic because I'm getting a little bit concerned about the lack of chat about another centre back coming in. A winger's been spoken about, potentially a left winger. I know a lot of people look at the options we have now. James Forrest is playing well. Nicholas Kuhn looks really good. Dyson Maeda is just brilliant. Dyson Maeda. Lewis Palmer, there's potentially someone to work with there, and people maybe look at that and think we don't need another winger. I would still prefer to have a left winger in, but I will happily admit that it's probably a fair bit down the list of priorities. There's certainly other positions that I think are in far greater need of a reinforcement or reinforcements. And a forward as well. I'm pretty relaxed about a third forward being signed. I think Dyson Maeda showed at the weekend that he's absolutely fine as our third striking option. He'll mainly play off the left, but if we ever have some sort of injury crisis and both Kyogo and Adamida are missing, I'm more than happy with that, with Dyson Maeda being deployed in that position, and you could play someone like James Forrest or Lewis Palmer on the left-hand side. Having said that, there was a mention yesterday from Football Scotland of Ireland international Aaron Connolly. Football Scotland have been told that Celtic are keeping an eye on him. He's a 24-year-old forward. You probably remember him playing, ironically, for Brighton and Hove Albion. I think he was maybe part of their team before they went really good, but I think he certainly played in the Premier League and popped up with some goals. Actually signed him in Football Manager for Celtic at one point, I'm remembering now, and he was really good for me. Probably means very little. He was last at Hull City. He's now available on a free transfer, which we know the Celtic board will like. So he could be a perfect fit for that third striker role. Someone without a club who would probably be, I know I'm kind of making a bit of a generalisation here, but the fact that he's Irish, he would probably have, at the very least, a soft spot for Celtic, be happy to come in as third option and probably get some sort of minutes and would probably back himself to maybe force his way up the pecking order or all of that kind of stuff. So Aaron Connolly, one to keep an eye on in terms of that third striker. As I say, I'm very relaxed about that. I think Dyson Maeda's fine. So I'm happy with things as they are there. My overall point here is that if Brendan Rodgers is wanting 1 midfielder, 2 if Matt O'Reilly goes, which looks likely, plus a first choice left back, which surely Brendan Rodgers wants. If we're all seeing it, he'll be seeing it. And a centre back as well as another one I would assume he would want, plus potentially a winger, plus potentially a third forward. That's a hell of a lot of work to do in 10 days, given that so far this summer, in well over 2 months now, we've signed 2 goalkeepers and 2 players we already knew about from being at the club on loan last season. With that in mind, there's a lot of work to be done in the last 10 days, and I think if we're honest about it, we have to admit that the chances of Celtic getting all those positions in are, virtually non-existent. So the question kind of becomes, what can we expect Celtic to do? And it might be about those priority positions. I think the club are keen to bring a left back in. There's been chat about a few players now. We had the Ajax fellow, was it Wijndal, mentioned late last week. We've had Owen Beck heavily mentioned. Prior to that, Hugo Bueno, who has now gone to Feyenoord, so we won't be signing him. But it seems like the left back position is one that the club want to sign. As I've already said, that has to be the case. It seems like they have a rough idea of who they'll go for. If Matt O'Reilly moves on, probably going to be Arne Engels from Augsburg. An interesting wee line in one of the reports overnight saying that we've spoken or had tentative talks with his representatives. So that's interesting. There's a few potential stumbling blocks for Arne Engels. The fact we'd probably have to part with about £10 million is a pretty big one. That would be a club record. I guess we would face competition for him as well, given that he's quite highly sought after. So that may be a tough one to do, but I think as a Matt O'Reilly replacement, it's one we would all feel pretty good about, given his pedigree and the fact he's quite young, highly rated, can improve more. Probably isn't at Matt O'Reilly level at the moment. Well, clearly not, because he's costing 10 million as opposed to 25, but could hopefully get there in time. And that's kind of all we can ask for with regards to this Celtic transfer strategy. When we sell players for big money at the right time, it's fine as long as we spend some sort of decent money to replace them. The other midfielder Brendan Rodgers is talking about, I should have said, by the way, Alvin Sanchez, I think the other kind of potential Matt O'Reilly replacement that's been spoken about. He's seems to be maybe a level down from Engels, but we've been keen on him for a while, so it could be him as well. In terms of the other midfielder that Brendan Rodgers is talking about, maybe someone like Luke McCowan. If you've been really optimistic, maybe Lennon Miller at Motherwell. Jeffrey Schlupp could fit that bill as well, as maybe a slightly less glamorous signing, but someone who could still be pretty effective for us. Now, moving to the centre-back stuff, I realise we're going all over the pitch here, but yeah, a bit of a concern for me at this stage, because it doesn't seem like there's been any recent chat about someone coming in. I think at this stage the Darrell O'Shea stuff seems very unlikely, given that he's playing for Burnley at the moment. There's been interest, I think, from Brentford in him as well. And the fact that was probably 4 weeks ago, if not longer, that we were linked with him. For me, we need to sign a centre-back. Generally like Liam Scales, but I think if we're all honest and we want to match ourselves at Champions League level, you need to be doing better than Liam Scales, I think, against some of the best teams in Europe. I think as brutal as that might sound, it is as simple as that for me. And yeah, I just think we've left ourselves with a lot of work to do in the final 10 days. Basically because we've taken so long in other deals so far this summer. I think we've got a bit of a battle in our hands to have the squad in a stronger place coming out of the window than we were at the end of last season. And as we know, from what Brendan Rodgers has said and figures that Celtic in the past have said, that's always the ambition, to be stronger coming out of the window than we went into it. I think the business we've done so far has been good. There's just not been enough of it. It's taken far too long, and as a result we're now going to have to kind of scramble a bit again in the final 10 days, and I think that was the fear for everyone. There's been a bit of chat about Rio Hatate and Leicester City. I'm pretty sure Hatate won't be allowed to leave the club during this window. It would be interesting, I think, to find out what would happen if a mega bid came in for Rio Hatate, because we know what they're like at Celtic. Yeah, that's all I'll say. But I don't really see that happening, to be honest. And I think unless it's like a kind of crazy bid for Hatate, he won't be allowed to leave, given that we're probably going to lose O'Reilly at this stage. So yeah, that's where we're at transfer-wise. A lot of work to be done, and probably a bit of a realisation for me anyway, that we're not going to get in everything I'd hoped for. I think generally we can still be positive about some aspects of it. I think like some of the players I've been linked with, the likes of Engels, would get me quite excited. And as I've said, I think that's probably the best as fans we could hope for if Matt O'Reilly does move on. Other areas like the centre-back one, I just think if we end up not signing a centre-back or a left-back, I will find it completely unacceptable. But with just 10 days to go, that seems to be how we're feeling. Feel so positive about the team on the pitch. I think we're going to have a really exciting season watching them. I think domestically we're going to win the vast majority of matches. I certainly hope we're going to win all 3 domestic trophies. That's obviously never a given, but I think we're obviously the kind of team that's most likely to do that by a long shot. But it's that Champions League stuff. It's just such a gulf in quality between the domestic stuff we play and going up to that Champions League level. And it's about having the squad in the best place for that. Brendan Rodgers wants quality in. I think we're really yet to see that in a number of positions. So, and it's going to become a bit harder if O'Reilly moves on. So, yep, a frantic last 10 days I think we can expect, with build up to the first derby of the season not far away. The Champions League draw is like 8-9 days away. I think it's next Thursday. It's all going to be happening. So you should probably stick around and give us a sub as well if you've not yet managed to do it. I'm talking to you. We're firmly on the road to 10,000 subscribers, around 900 or so away, and it would be lovely to get to 10k, I don't know, by the end of the transfer window. At least that will give me some sort of excitement, even if Celtic don't. Right, I'll return tomorrow, everyone. I think Stevie may join me at that stage to chat some more.